All right, guys. So my name is Zach Clapper. I'm the associate head coach and the offensive line coach at Zanesville High School here in Ohio. Um, just wanted to point out, and I'll come back to this stuff at the end. My Twitter handle, or it's called X now technically, but I always call it Twitter. I feel like everybody still references it as Twitter, but is listed there, and my email. So if we go through anything that you might have questions about, feel free to reach out to me. Um, I will say that most of what I talk about today will be from a high school perspective. Not that a lot of this stuff isn't general information that somebody at the college ranks could use, but all of my coaching experience is at the high school level, and more specifically, the small high school level, where we have anywhere from 40 to 50 kids on a roster mostly, sometimes 50 to 60, but we're not, none of my experiences from like any, where we have 70 to 100 kids on a roster, like some people. So, um, just so we're on the same page of where a lot of this is coming from, that is what I've dealt with for my career. And I'm going to discuss today my lessons that I've learned and that I feel are important for being a first year offensive coordinator. So, just a little bit about me. Um, I, again, I touched on being a small town high school coach. I've coached at two separate schools. I am originally a Zanesville High School alumni. So, I got my coaching start at Zanesville High School when I graduated college in 2018. I spent the first 2 years at Zanesville High School coaching freshman ball as a position coach. I coached tight ends um, and H backs, like the wing backs in our offense at that time, and then primarily ran the freshman offense. And that was how I got my start. I very much learned the game from our offense coordinator at the time, and he was very instrumental in teaching me what I know. So a lot of that stems from um, his philosophy as well. So I played offensive line in high school and in college. I was fortunate enough to be on some successful high school teams. And then I played Division III college football at Capital University in Columbus, Ohio. Um, Most guys know of the Mount Unions. They were in our conference, so it was fun to compete against those guys every year. Um, and I played offensive line my entire life. So again, when it comes to, we'll talk about like having an identity and stuff like that. That plays a big role in who I am, as far as being an offensive coordinator and a coach in general. Um, I've had 7 years as a coach in total. I get my first two were at Zanesville, and then our offense coordinator actually got a head coaching job at a smaller county school in our area. Um, and I was fortunate enough for him to ask me to go with him. It was a very unique experience. The program over there at the time had some struggles, and I could really see what building a program was like. And also, I got to coach a variety of different things. It was one of those schools, resources were limited. At one point in time, there were three of us coaches in the summer. Um, More, just with some schedules, some guys couldn't get there really till August or till school started. So I was fortunate. I viewed it as a good thing. Is I was tasked with coaching both sides of the ball. I needed to make sure that I understood different aspects of scheme, technique, whatever it was, so that I could make sure that I was doing the right things as far as what my job was. So I coached defensive line, I coached offensive line, coached some JV ball, spent some time really just trying to learn overall schemes, rules, how do we install things, how do we explain things to the kids, how do we implement them, and a lot of things that when you're a young coach you don't think about because you want to spend time, um, you know, creating and designing cool things and like stuff you see on the internet or read about, all that sort of stuff. The little details of how do we install things, How do we teach it? Are there different techniques we can use than what maybe I used as a player or what I've taught, so on and so forth. So it just forces you when you're in a position like that where there's not a lot of you on the varsity staff um, to really dive in and learn about the little details that um, go a long way in becoming a successful coach at this level. We were fortunate enough to uh, turn the program around, won 2 games our first year, won 6 games our second year, won 8 games my third year there. And then I ended up coming back to Zanesville. The coach here at the time I had played with in college. He had asked me to be his offensive coordinator. It was the first time I'd had an opportunity to be a coordinator. Um, so I jumped at the opportunity, and I felt like the coach that had hired me and coached me originally had just resigned, took a step back, and I felt like I could do some good with what I had learned coming back to Zanesville. Um, and and again, taking that step not only professionally but as far as building another program. Um, Spent that year being the offense coordinator again, learned a lot. I ended up I didn't get there until end of June, so you got to learn the kids quickly. Got to have a lot of meetings and talk to them, learn what they do well, learn what they don't do well, see kind of where they're at, what they can retain, what they understand, and kind of go from there before you can really formulate a plan. So there was a lot that had to happen quickly because once July hits, things get rolling here in Ohio. So definitely wanted to make sure that I was prepared for that instance. Um, Spent that year calling the offense, and then ended up working for a new head coach the following year. And he had already had ties to somebody who he wanted to call the offense in a system that he already trusted, which is fine. After talking to him, getting to know him, kind of going over what I knew, I was fortunate enough for him to ask me to be the associate head coach. Again, being an alumni, coaching both sides of the ball in my previous experience, I definitely, was very fortunate and very thankful for that opportunity to where I could again be a part of the team as a whole. I viewed it as another step for me as somebody who wants to be a head coach because you're tasked as an associate head coach, you're tasked with things to, again, details that you don't normally think about, whether it's taking care of equipment, whether it's being a part of booster club meetings, so on and so forth. So that was, again, I was very fortunate enough to be able to do that. And taking a step back, I could kind of reevaluate myself as a coordinator, learn from somebody else who had been a coordinator, see how they do things, what maybe like could I have done better. And a lot of those lessons, like seeing that is what prompted a lot of the lessons that I'm going to talk about today. So, and again, that's where I'm at right now. Definitely want to get back into the coordinator role. I just think it's something that, I really enjoyed doing. Definitely only doing it once. You want another crack at it because, like I said, there's a lot of things that I learned that I know I want to do better next time. We're going to get into those. So, like I say, if you have any questions, I'll make sure to go back to my contact information from the first slide at the end of this, and feel free to reach out. So, first thing that I would say when you are starting your journey as an offense coordinator is developing a system. Now, I know for me, my system kind of came from what I had been a part of because I had worked with the same guy who had called the offense for the first 5 years of my career before I took my own job as an offense coordinator. Um, so what I never really dissected the different parts to it, never really took time to kind of understand how everything fits. I just kind of did what I had been doing or what I had been learning over the past 5 years. But when I was able to take a step back and think about developing a system, I really broke it down into 4 different categories. Now, maybe you could argue that there needs to be more, less, whatever. I just try to make this as simple as possible and sort these things into ways that I know that my next opportunity that I'm going to um, make sure that I'm checking these boxes as I go. Um, so again, an effective offensive system is a blend of many different variables, and it is definitely easy for you to get lost before you even begin. Okay. In my opinion, sorting these variables into these different categories again helps you, all right, organize things in your brain so that as you get going in the summertime, all right, in fall camp, so on and so forth, all right, you are addressing each area properly. Um, it starts with your own identity, who you are. Me as a playing offensive line my entire career, that's a huge part of who I am. And again, we'll discuss that in a future slide. But again, everybody's different. What do you want to do? What do you want your offense to look like? What do you want to prioritize? So on and so forth. What your kids can execute. And this is big at the high school level, especially the smaller the school is, where you don't necessarily have a ton of options as far as the skill set of your kids. Um, at the high school level, you get the kids that come through the door every day, and you got to coach those kids, and you got to get the best out of those kids and put them in positions to succeed. If you can't, you know, understand what they can do well, or if you're trying to get them to execute something that they physically can't do, then that can lead to problems when you put the product out there on the field. So again, what your kids can execute is a huge part. Also, what can you coach and what can you teach? No matter what level you're at, players are different, learning styles are different. Helping them, understand the entire picture, what their job is, what their role is, um, is huge. Because if they don't understand that, then that can be a missing piece once you put the product out there. Um, so, what can you explain? I spent some time as a throwers coach too, throwing shot put and discus. I learned that the way you phrase things goes a long way, especially when you're teaching technique. All right, and those little details, not so much like an X's and O's, what an assignment is, but what do you need to do to execute your job? So again, that goes back to how can you phrase it so that you understand it, you're explaining it well, you're confident in what you're doing, and that message sticks, all right, with your players. And then lastly, situational preparation. Um, we all know that there's so many different situations that happen throughout the course of a football game. Um, I would say that trying to prepare for all of them or think of all of them at one time can be pretty overwhelming. But you just want to make sure to try to cover not only with your players, but with your staff as well as your head coach. All right, cover as much as you can. And again, understanding your kids, you might not need to explain, all right, every little situation or why something's happening. But as long as you know, your staff knows, then by all means, um, you can go in prepared to handle whatever gets thrown at you. So we're going to start with what it means to have your own identity when it comes to being an offense coordinator. Um, who are you when it comes to football? All right, what do you want to do? I know me personally as an offensive lineman, I'm not going to be a guy that wants to, sling the pill around all over the field and play with athletes in space. Now, again, as a high school coach, if I have that, for sure, then I'm going to find a way to do that. However, my identity is I want to control the ball. I want to run the football. I want to be imposing, all right, as far as be the tougher team, win the time of possession, you know, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I don't care how we do it. All right. But in a perfect world, that's what I like. All right. I think that that's the best way to be an effective offense. Again, everybody's different. I'm sure that many of you have your own feelings towards that. But your identity is who you are when it comes to football. All right. What do you love most about the game? What style of play do you believe in? All right. And what are the keys that you believe will win you the football game? All right. And that comes back to prioritize what you're preaching. All right. You can't prioritize every single thing that goes into a football game. Right. There's only so much practice time, all right, throughout the week and throughout camp and the summer and all that. So, um, again, if your identity is we're going to be the tougher team, and by all means, we're going to run the ball, we're going to control the ball, we're going to do those things, and that's you. Then prioritize that. You know, don't don't try to be more than who you are. And then two, your identity is going to be your foundation. All right. So again, for me, I want to run the ball. I want to make sure that we're controlling the ball. I want to be the tougher team. Okay. Then when things go, awry and they're not going well, or you're getting a rut or whatever the case may be, whether it's throughout the course of a game or course of a couple of weeks, whatever it is, that's your foundation. Go back to it. Maybe you're trying to do a little too much. All right. Maybe you're getting away from what you've prioritized all the way up to this point. Um, so again, always keep that at the forefront of just be you. Okay. Be you, understand who you want to be, what do you want your team to be, what you want your offense to be. And because your players embody that. If you prioritize what you preach and you harp on it day in and day out constantly, um, eventually it'll stick and players buy into that because they know it's you. The second thing, all right, and again, um, I don't want to say this any one of these four categories is the most important because they all play a crucial role in being an effective offense. But um, you know, on a given day, any one of these things can be at the forefront of what you need to do, all right, to become effective in your offensive planning and who you are as an offense. So again, coming from the high school perspective, where year to year skill sets change, year to year, um, you have different players in key spots. Maybe a player played running back the year before, now he's got to play quarterback the next year just because of what you have. Um, Asking yourself constantly, what can your players execute, is something that you definitely, as you start the planning process heading into a new season, all right, that needs to stay at the front of your mind. um, for example, I talked about running the ball. If I have big kids up front that can move people, well then typically running the ball is pretty easy. You can just run ISO all day. Funny story, I've got one of my close friends who has been an offense coordinator for a couple years now. um, he was coaching his team in a state semifinal game, and in that state semifinal game, I can't remember what the final score was, but it wasn't close. Out of his, I think it was 67 offensive plays, he ran ISO 61 times because he could. I mean, he had a kid going to Division One. Like, the offensive line was huge. All right, so again, nothing fancy. His players could just accomplish moving guys off the ball. It didn't matter. So, again, leaning on what those players can do and what they can do well. And then the next thing, what can your players mentally retain and understand? I'm a teacher as well. I teach math and I teach social studies. Um, Understanding again, what can your players retain up here? If it's a player that just needs things, put simply, they don't need an explanation of why they're doing what they're doing. They just need to know what their job is. Understand that. All right. Understand what cues you could use to help them fix their technique a little bit more. All right. To get a little bit better at the job they're trying to execute. Um, and if they can retain a lot as far as being able to understand their different jobs on different plays and all that stuff, then by all means, have at it. But most kids that I've dealt with in my experience aren't like that. Um, they're few and far between as far as being able to retain a lot of information and understand the game as a whole. So, really, when you're formulating your plan and how you can, um, be multiple as far as your offense goes, what can we keep the same? I believe a lot in fewer plays, more formations. Think of your players first. What formations put them in the um, best possible situation to succeed, and then worry about the plays. So as far as different plays that I would call, I don't really like the idea of having a ton of those because again, affecting the job of the kids and what they have to remember and so on and so forth. Um, I would rather have like the way I'm calling plays, one word that adjusts the formation so that we get a different look on the defense. All right, that affects one kid versus the all 11 that are on the field by calling something a totally new formation or so on and so forth. And that was something I didn't learn or didn't even really think about until after I had spent time as an offensive coordinator. So again, it was just like those are little things that you can take a step back, or if you're not prioritizing right away, if you've never done this before, you might not think about. So again, what can your players mentally retain from your teaching, from your coaching, but physically when it comes to how they execute their jobs, and then mentally, right, knowing what they're supposed to do, where they line up, so on and so forth. And then lastly, again, it kind of all ties together, but what skills are you willing to commit in order to make sure that they're executed? All right. If you're a gap scheme run guy, all right, then down blocking is going to be a huge skill to your success. All right. Pulling and the different styles of pulling, whether you're pulling to kick a defensive end, whether you're pulling to wrap for a linebacker, whatever the case may be, or you're pulling out in space on a pin and pull play. What skills are you willing to commit to? Again, there's only so much practice time you get in a week. Okay. And as far as your players go, all right, if you don't have kids that are, I hate to say this, but great athletes, that's just the reality of it, then they need the repetition. They need to do the same things over and over again. Um, Spent time, you know, I cut my teeth as an inside zone guy. That's what I ran in high school. We were a spread team, so our main run play was inside zone. Um, that's what I learned under when it came to coaching and how to teach that and so on and so forth. Um, but it's as simple as working one step at a time during those late spring, early summer months to get kids to be able to do that no matter the situation, no matter what their job is, as far as where the defense lines up. That way they're not thinking about it. They can do it over and over and over again. You break it down to one step at a time. I had the same blocking progression when I coached offensive line those 3 years uh, that I for sure was doing every day. Every day. So as a coordinator, you got to think about that for your entire group, your entire side of the ball. All right. So when it comes to the quarterback, it might be footwork on quick game. All right. When it comes to the receivers, it's fun. It can be as simple as fundamentals on catching. All right. When you're catching like this, index finger and thumbs together. All right. When it's underhand like this, make sure your pinkies are together. It can be as simple as that. All right. I've talked to guys and everybody's different. But the big thing is prioritize those fundamental skills that are always going to be executed at the right possible, like at the right time. Like they're a part of whatever you decide to do. See what I'm saying? So again, you just have to make sure that you understand what those are. You relay that to your staff. You harp on that with your staff. Um, you know, you might have to find some clinic tapes on the internet, whatever the case may be, some resources to teach your staff those things, especially if it's a new group, guys you haven't worked with before, but that is on you as an offense coordinator. And again, it's totally different, especially for me. I had only coached O-line. I had learned, all right, a lot about different positions and so on and so forth and studied the game. But those little details, as far as the fundamental skills, I never really had to prioritize, and I should have. I should have. So, again, that's something that you really got to think about. All right, as you're planning and implementing when it comes to practice schedules, what you want to do, what's important to you, what do we need to make sure that we're executing at a high level. All right, what can you teach your players and coaches? Okay, again, it goes back to how you can explain things. All right, how you can model things. Let me move this out of the way real quick. All right, and there's a lot that goes into it. Again, it goes back to leaning on your identity. All right, I know that I definitely fell into this category when I was first starting out, especially when I got my first opportunity to really be a varsity head coach and so on and so forth. There's always a ton of things out there. All right, there's so much stuff out there. You could go to one single clinic and find a ton of stuff. But how does it relate to you? How does it relate to who you are? What do you want your offense to accomplish? All right, and how does it fit? All right, your goals. All right, and again, I go back. A lot of people love to learn about the X's and O's side of things and so on and so forth, but I think more so the more valuable stuff is different ways you can teach technique. So again, lean on your identity. If you're a gap scheme guy and that's what you want to run, go find different ways to coach the gap scheme stuff, gap scheme blocking, or so on and so forth. Um, it's got to fit you, who you are, all right, and you really got to lean into who you want to be. And listen to different perspectives and coaches. I know that might go against the first point as far as leaning on who you are, but listening to different perspectives, all right, different coaches, guys with different philosophies, all right, opens your mind to just the game, being a student of the game, learning different things, all right, and who knows, you might be able to manipulate something that they say or that they do into what you do, all right. So again, me, I want to be able to run the ball. I might go listen to a guy who leans heavily on RPOs, all right, and I might pull one or two things, whether it be a technique, whether it be just a simple RPO and how they teach it, how they coach it, so that it makes my base play, whatever it is for that year, all right, more effective. All right, because maybe going into that year, I have the kids that can do that. I know I have kids that fits their skill set. So you want to listen to as many different perspectives as possible. Find clinic tapes, go to clinics, read different articles, whatever the case may be. Just reach out to guys. Ask guys that have mentored you to be like, hey, do you know anybody that does a lot of, RPOs, does a lot of, or maybe it's an air raid guy. How do they teach certain things in their passing game? Whatever it is. All right, but go study the game. All right, study the game. And again, I know point 2 and 3 are could be the same thing, but I want to put a heavy emphasis on, don't overstep the value, all right, in just learning new ways to teach techniques. All right. And again, this is coming from a high school guy. So, you know, building kids up and teaching them specific techniques, when they're from middle school to freshman to JV to varsity, goes a long way, because it's not like college where, when guys get there, they have a certain level of skill set, or else they wouldn't be there. So invest as much time or even more in studying different techniques and skills within the game, all right, as you do the X's and O's. All right. You know who you are. All right. You know what you want to do. All right. I think power is the greatest play. All right. That God's ever created. But Um, you know, I need to spend time on teaching that, like the techniques that allow me to run that versus just different ways that I could, all right, line up in order to run power. All right. I like doing that stuff. All right. But the less glamorous, how can I teach the down block? How can I teach the pull wrap technique? All right. How can I teach the mesh if we got to do power read? You know, those things go a lot farther, especially at the high school level. All right. Than, um, just like I said, studying X's and O's and different ways to line up to do things. Um, and then lastly, don't be afraid to pivot. And I don't want that to sound contradictory to leaning on your identity. Um, because again, your identity is more of I'm going to be able to run the football no matter what, or I want to get guys out in space. All right, let athletes be athletes. That's more your identity. I'm talking about pivoting in what allows you to do those things. All right, again, I want to run the ball. When I started as an offense coordinator, I'd primarily run inside zone, and that was what I started implementing. We had a quarterback at the time, decent thrower, but a really good athlete, shifty. All right, was great in space. And because I'd spent so much time, all right, coaching inside zone, I was very comfortable in how to manipulate that from like to get guys in space, to do different things, different backfield actions or whatever, to read different defenders, so on and so forth. Um, so I stuck with that, and I tried to keep it very simple because it was my first year. I didn't want to overload the kids. But when in reality, you know, the years past, they had ran power read. They were still a spread offense, but it was power read. It was more things like that. They ran variations of trap and so on and so forth. Um, they still, like I said, spread teams out, but I wasn't comfortable enough coaching those things at a broad level. So I steered away from that. When in reality, I probably should have pivoted to those types of things, not been afraid to ask for help from guys who had been there, from my head coach, whoever. I was very fortunate. My head coach at the time let me be me. All right. Not that he would never pitch ideas or this, that, and the other, but he was very confident in what I could do. All right. And what my job was, that like he let me take the reins, and very appreciative of that. But looking back on it, definitely should have took more of what they did in years past. Maybe I could have slowly implemented the inside zone stuff, but um, and just build on what they had done, make it my own. But again, I steered away from that. I didn't pivot fast enough. That's probably as far as big things from my first year, specifically to me, is I didn't pivot. All right, I should have, looking back on it, pivoted more, and that's part of the learning process. It doesn't matter how many years you've done this, guys that I've talked to. There's always things that you wish you could have done different, and it's no different when you're an offense coordinator. And that's why I say don't be afraid to, you know, teach something a different way. Ask for help when it comes to those things. Maybe your play calling sequence is different, or you can adjust a certain way. Maybe you come up with a different personnel grouping that allows you to do different things. Think outside the box too. Um, there's a ton of different ways you can do that. Like I think back and forth to, um, that year when I was calling plays, and about halfway through the year, that same quarterback got hurt. He hurt his shoulder. He could still play, still wanted to play. He was a senior, but he couldn't throw the ball. So we put a sophomore in, and I should have been more creative on maybe doing some unbalanced stuff to get that sophomore out of the pocket more. Teams knew we wanted to roll him out because he wasn't comfortable standing back there. He could throw a decent ball, but I wanted to, instead of doing things to make him successful, I didn't really put our team in a very good situation. So it's just those are little things that don't be afraid to do things like that, because especially like if you're in a rut, you don't want to keep banging your head against the wall. So don't be afraid to pivot from certain situations, and ask for help if you don't really know which way to pivot to. So, all right, preparing for situations. Now, when you prepare for situations, again, there's a ton of situations that you come up with, which is why I start with like brainstorm with your staff early and often, brainstorm with your head coach. Um, do what you can to predict these situations before you're in them, and practice these situations consistently. Um, whether it's 2 minute, 4 minute, tight red zone, all right, backed up, all the way within your own 5 yard line, whatever the case may be. All right. But brainstorm how you're going to approach these situations, all right, and how you're going to practice these situations, which again goes to how do we cover these? Are there situations where we need to explain to our kids what they need to do? Or are these just situations where we just need to put it in the practice plan that, like, hey, we're going to move to this part of the field. We're going to call these specific plays, but we don't need to necessarily explain to our kids why. All right, we're calling these certain plays. Um, that comes back to knowing your kids, knowing what they can retain. But sometimes, you have paralysis by analysis, and the kids get overloaded, and when in reality they just need to go play. So, again, as long as you as a coordinator are in tune with your staff, your head coach, on how we're going to cover these things, and how like we're going to attack these situations, that's the biggest thing. And then the smallest details have the biggest impact on those situations. All right. Again, tight red zone, being backed up, um, things like that. It's as simple as um, making sure that your kids can take under center snaps so you can do a quarterback sneak. You know what I mean? Um, Prioritizing that between the quarterbacks and center exchange. Like, hey, you need to be able to take an under center snap, because if I'm at the 1 yard line, all right, I don't want to have to put the ball in shotgun, all right, and risk losing yardage. Again, it goes back to my identity. I want to impose my will. I want to be able to run the ball. We're going to be able to get under center. And if we can't get a yard, then that's on me, but we're going to try to get that yard going straight ahead. Um, so again, it's those little details that, you don't necessarily think about when you're heading into your first year as an offense coordinator, right? It's very tough to predict all those things and think about all those things, especially if you are in a situation where, like I was, where I kind of was a little late getting started. Um, but even then, if you go into it with a few months to prepare, like it's very easy for those details to slip your mind. All right. So don't be afraid to ask your head coach, or don't be afraid to ask your staff, like, are there any details that we're missing, specific to a certain position group or the offense as a whole, whatever it is, definitely try to make sure we are focusing on the smallest details, because those do have the biggest impact. I know that's cliche, but it's true. And then, each situation is different. Every trip to the red zone, or every time you're backed up, or every third down is a different situation. Right? We can categorize it all into third down, tight red zone, whatever the case may be, but it's all different. You are not going to be perfect, all right, in every single situation. All right. Acknowledge what you can do better. And it's as simple as that. Now, part of acknowledging what you can do better goes back to not being afraid to pivot. All right. Again, that's one of my biggest lessons that I have from my own personal experience is I very much, after each game watching the tape, I was like, you know what, guys, I didn't put you in a very good spot here. Or I would tell the staff, be like, yeah, this wasn't a very good idea, or so on and so forth. But the next step to acknowledging that is making the necessary changes, whether tweaking the practice plan, tweaking the game plan, whatever it is. Um, Acknowledge what you can do better. All right. And then move forward, because that's the best part about this game is you're going to get another opportunity. All right. The next week, or next play, next quarter, whatever it is. So, um, you know, acknowledge it, make the necessary changes, and move forward. really just to wrap this up, guys, again, I was only a coordinator for 1 year, but there were so many different things that I know personally I wish I'd done different. So many things I wish I knew before. Some things you just don't fully grasp mentally until you do it. So, um, really, if you take away anything from this, number one, be yourself. All right. What do you want to do? All right. What do you want to be able to accomplish? Like I said, it goes back to I'm going to make sure that my team can run the ball. We're going to impose our will, and we're going to hold the ball for 3 quarters of the game if we can. All right. If that's you, that's you. If you want to score 50 points in a game and you want to sling the rock around and get athletes in space, then be you. Just be you. You know, there, don't try to be someone you're not. Obviously, discuss with your head coach, all right, how that fits into their overall plan, their vision for the team. All right. But take whatever your role is as far as, you know, if your head coach wants to sling the ball around, but you want to be a ball control offense, well, find a way to mesh it. But don't leave your identity, all right, to try to be somebody you're not. Be yourself, all right, and take that and learn, adapt, grow, learn a different way that you can teach something, all right, learn a new concept that the kids can execute, um, adapt when things aren't going well. If that technique isn't working, you know, try to find something different. Kids will appreciate that. I think that if they know that you're trying to put them in a position to be successful, then they'll be understanding of that. And I'm not going to ask a kid who's 180 pounds playing right guard to base block. All right, guys who are 220 to 250, playing three technique or nose tackle, a lot throughout the game. I'm going to teach them how to play with leverage. I'm going to teach them how to take good angles. I'm going to call plays that are going to help those kids execute what I'm asking them to do. All right. I'm going to adapt. All right. I would love to run ISO 60 times a game, but most people at the high school level are not that fortunate. Uh, so it's just one of those things where adapt to what is going on, and it's football. Things happen that you can't predict. So adapt and grow from them. Prepare and then prepare some more. All right. That's supposed to say that. So I apologize for the typo. But again, we all make mistakes. Um, so I don't want to say overload yourself, but as far as like preparing for whether you're in the early stages and it's the springtime and you're preparing for the summer and for the fall camp and so on and so forth. All right. You can never, all right, in my opinion, all right, as far as studying what you want to do, thinking what you want to do, you can never ask too many questions. All right. I'm sure some people disagree with that. All right. I definitely think that there's a point of diminishing return when it comes to teaching your kids. But when you're discussing with your staff what you want to do, what you want to be, so on and so forth, what's the outlook, you know, for the following year, um, you can't like do that enough, in my opinion. So again, prepare and then prepare some more and study the game. And I don't think I've touched on this enough, but again, it's a game. Keep the game fun. All right. Find ways to keep all your kids involved. Make your kids want to be there. It will make your job so much easier. All right. If you make your kids want to be there at football, they want to play offense, they want to perform their role at the highest level they can, it will make your job so much easier. So, again, find ways to keep it fun. Throw something into the practice schedule that the kids are going to enjoy, whether it be a competition, maybe in warm-ups, you have a lineman go hop in with the wide receivers in a ring of fire drill where they're catching different routes. All right. I'm not saying do that all the time because some linemen don't need to try to do that. But at the same time, whatever the case may be, keep the game fun, because that will make your job easier. That will make things better for the team as a whole. and you'll score more points that way. So, that is very important when it comes to this whole thing. Don't lose sight of that, banging your head against the wall because you think something needs to be, you need to get to a certain point or anything like that. Don't be afraid to, take a step back and make sure the kids are enjoying what they're doing. So, um, that's about all I have, guys. I'm going to go back here to my first slide. Again, maybe if I didn't explain something, in enough detail, which is quite very possible. I'm not going to act like that I'm the best at explaining things, but you can reach out to me. My X handle is at Mr. Clapper ZCS, and then I also have my email up there, zclapper95 at yahoo.com. Shoot me an email. Ask away. By all means, I love talking football at any point, whether it's X's and O's, whether it's technique, positions, whatever the case may be. Might even be defense. All right. Like I said, I just love talking ball in general. So, again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you, guys.